I can say with confidence that the Halo 3 multiplayer experience was more than just a competitive environment for me. It was actually where I learned to socialize, which might not always be a positive thing, but for someone that was homeschooled and dealt with a lot of in-home issues, video games or books or really anything else was always an outlet that I could exploit to escape. The most important friendship I made along the way was with a guy who went by the gamertag of Ephemeral Death, and at the time, my own gamertag was Heretical Life. It was a typical match of Team Slayer and Halo 3 on Valhalla that became a catalyst for our friendship. In an entire lobby with no mics and a rather one-sided loss, our conversation started from me clearing my throat. There were few times when I would wear my headset. It was one of those cheap ones that sounded more like static than actual audio. You know the one, every Xbox came with them, and they lasted pretty long. I didn't always wear it because, most of the time, I didn't really enjoy hearing other people's voices and was still heavily susceptible to criticism, which is code for I was a nervous wreck. Our interaction was minimal at best. We lost pretty horribly and both complained about the circumstances surrounding that loss. Namely, one of our teammates had quit in the very beginning. For whatever reason, me and Ephemeral Death became friends. It was kind of nice to play video games with someone that was remotely familiar, as opposed to being in a lobby with complete strangers. Years came and went, both of our real-life circumstances were a complete mystery to one another, and we fell into emotion. Occasionally, when we were both on, we would play together. This time would range from maybe a match to a couple hours. Braving the lobbies of Modern Warfare 2 really started with this ephemeral guy, and was really a pivotal moment in developing my own ability to confront people rather than just stay mute and resign myself to hearing someone complain. I began to develop the habit of chiming in and giving my opinion on whether or not I thought their complaints were warranted. Our friendship was on and off. We hardly ever asked real questions about each other, and instead a simple message of "wanna slay" would be exchanged, a party invite would be made, and the games would be played. He was never the only friend that I had, but he was always the one that I wanted to play with most. We had our real first understanding of who we were a few years after that, when I expressed that I wouldn't be able to play as much anymore because of some issues with my living situation and family. And he in turn had something similar going on, as he could no longer afford an Xbox Live subscription. It was a bitter goodbye, but one that really I never took in a negative light. You see, this friendship that I had developed was disconnected in almost every sense. We knew nothing about each other, and the only real grounds for our continued interaction was a video game that we were both moderately good at. Years would pass without so much as a word, until I decided to turn on my Xbox a few months before my 17th birthday. This was arguably the worst period of my life, and I lived alone, for the most part. I tried to relive some of my childhood in that moment, and much to my surprise, Ephemeral Death was online. Queued up, and years later we fell into the same rhythm without skipping a beat. It was almost like we never stopped playing together. It was here that I learned from him that Halo Reach would be dropping in September. What I didn't know was that this period of my life would become the graveyard for one of my closest friendships. We both went to the midnight release, and from day one we played together. I don't know what made Halo Reach feel so much different than Halo 3, but there was something strangely appealing about it. The customization, the credit reward system, or the fact that its story had a compelling element of self-sacrifice, and how not every soldier would make it home. Seeing as this was a dark period in my life, it was also the point in our friendship where we started to share complaints, not about the game, but rather our lives. Instead of complaining about some guy camping with a shotgun or a sword, we would complain about our families, our finances, our mindsets. He learned of my disconnected upbringing, my alcoholic and abusive mother who had previously cut games short by screaming or yelling, and my complete and total belief that I should not exist. I learned of his immigrant family that struggled with poverty, his abusive stepfather, and his own want to end his life. Surprisingly enough, we didn't shelter these problems or issues. We didn't pat each other on the back and say, everything will be okay, because we knew that it wouldn't. Still, just having someone that we could express our problems to was a comfort in and of itself. We joked, mocked, and sarcastically exchanged insults, but we knew the intricacy of our lives. We kept everything at gamertag value. He was still Ephemeral Death, and I was now Heretical Death. having changed my gamer tag to reflect his. Halo Reach was a game we played almost exclusively together. I had plenty of free time, and so did he. Late nights were often filled with Starbucks Frappuccinos and hot Cheetos. The first thing I did after coming home from work was turn on my Xbox to see if my friend was online. My obsession became so much so that I cared more about my in-game character than I did about myself as a person. My goal was to max accommodations, and I did that. I wanted a certain armor type, and I got it. I wanted every achievement in the game. I remember trying for hours on end, over and over, to assassinate an elite a certain way. I mean, seriously, it was just aggravating at certain points. Even Ephemeral would get offline, but I would stay online for hours. I wanted max rank and beyond, and that was my priority. I didn't even realize just how much the game had dominated my life, and I was proud of the things that I had accomplished. But even that would be short-lived, as June 23rd of 2011 was the last day that I would play Halo Reach. Around this time, Ephemeral Death had come into his own personal issues and he could no longer play with me. It was unfortunate that it took his personal life affecting his gameplay for me to realize I never really cared too much about the game. It was just the place where I would play with my best friend. I cared about my achievements and how I looked and my ranking in life, because I think I cared so much about it in real life too. I was always afraid of being a failure or being perceived as ugly or not successful. Since my real life was never much of an interest, I had somehow made my online life a placeholder for that, and that was where I got my value from. After the only person I cared about stopped playing the game, I no longer saw a reason in devoting hours and days of my life for these achievements. I missed having a person to talk to that I felt never judged me on anything. My love for this game translated into a love for the genre, which also translated into my enlisting of the Army, a pivotal moment in my life that signified a complete and total erasure of the past. I never knew my own login information, nor what my mother had used to secure the account, and I had never really cared. I made a new account of my own, from which I only played games casually, or not at all. So fast forward to this current date, when I log on to Halo Reach and find that the magic is gone. The armor system has changed, the ranking system that I cared so much about has changed, and the credit reward system is non-existent. The changes to the game didn't bother me so much as when I decided to go through the campaign, a campaign I had previously ran through with Ephemeral. It had almost lost all meaning up until the final mission. Lone Wolf. In this moment, Noble 6 is the last of their squad, having successfully completed the mission and ensured the escape of Captain Keyes, Cortana, and Master Chief. And they have one final mission: to survive. Wave after wave of increasingly powerful enemies attack until Noble 6 is overwhelmed and killed. Oddly enough, this scene hit me a bit harder than I would have liked. In my life, I've made plenty of mistakes, most of which have never really stuck out to me as detrimental to my advancement, but that might have just been me projecting my failures onto those around me. I idolized the self-sacrifice in this video game so much that I enlisted in the Army, in hopes that I too could do something similar. I read every book ever written in the verse because I considered soldiers who sacrificed themselves for others to be the epitome of what I wanted from life. The truth is, I never really valued myself at all, and I thought that in that sacrifice, I could have found value. But this, again, was me substituting my real life for an in-game counterpart. My real life wasn't noble or filled with sacrifice. It was filled with pain, abuse, and the slow realization that no matter the struggle, I could not perfect my stats or work towards any achievements that would make those around me like me more. Maybe it just took time, or for years, for me to grow out of this habit, but I feel I've finally reached some sort of conclusion. I'm actually really thankful that this was how I learned to socialize, and that the concepts I came to idolize were about self-sacrifice. I'm glad that I obtained achievement-orientated obsessions and focuses, but more than anything, I'm pretty happy that Ephemeral Death was my first real friend. Looking back on everything, my interest in this game died off when he stopped getting online. I wish I would have known his name, or even something as minimal as asked for his number. All my attempts to reach out to him for years have been met with silence. Part of growing up, I think, is understanding that sometimes you have to move on from the past. leaving behind bad memories and good ones too. At some point we played our last game together, and personally, I'm just glad we won it. Ephemeral Death, thank you for being one of my closest friends, and if by chance you ever see this, I would love to catch up and play together again sometime. I guess when I'm saying goodbye, it isn't just to the platform that made me who I am, but it's also to all those that helped me along the way. Something I learned from the games and novelizations is that Spartans never die, they are just mixing in action. The old friends I made never left, but we've gone our separate ways. So thank you for everything. And goodbye, Halo Reach.